let's get into this piece. This is just like a screenshot of Inyiki's piece over at medium.com. So let me go through what he's talking about here. This is Hiyiki Hestier's review of the Wakanda Forever film. So just let me get through this real quick. So he says, my generation of Black men who read Marvel and or DC comics in the 1990s know that there were virtually no Black heroes, especially in the mainstream. The Black Panther was perhaps the only one we could mirror ourselves in and try to re-signify our imagery about Black men in Africa. With technological advances and innovative special effects, hero movies have become worldwide box office hits. And in this context comes Black Panther, which has become Marvel's biggest success so far, a true commercial and of course symbolic phenomenon. Children, young people, and adults of all colors, creeds, and nationalities went to the theaters and were moved by its story. Black men and boys in particular were able for the first time to see a hero, king, leader, warrior, intelligent, sensitive, and ruler of a high-tech African kingdom. The antithesis of the idiotic, brutish, submissive Black man from a primitive Africa, historically such recurring stereotypes appearing in the media as a whole. T'Challa has family, affection, charisma, a circle of women he respects, is respected by, and shares his power with. In short, a film that challenged the prevailing negative representations of Black men. The death of Chadwick, the Black Panther, and Black men. Unfortunately, its actor Chadwick Boseman died in a tragic and premature death, which left what the fate of the sequel would be in suspense. Thus began speculation about who would interpret or inherit the role. Right at the beginning, there were several proposals on social networks. Some of them were for it to become one of the women close to T'Challa. A strange suggestion to say the least, since it was the actor who died, not Black Panther. Regardless of Boseman's talent, which was monstrous, Black Panther is an ideal. The character precedes and transcends the actor. In this way, even as Shuri could assume the mantle of the Panther, as has recently happened in the comics on a temporary basis, this, in my opinion, would have to be over time and as a function of the plot, and not because of Chadwick Boseman's death. Numerous heroes have been played by different actors, some iconic such as Batman, Joker, Superman, and Spider-Man. In other words, they simply killed off Black Panther. Despite all of the pomp and emotion surrounding the tribute to Boseman in the film, what was there was a funeral of a Black man and a hero. Furthermore, they turned the Black Panther film into a kind of pseudo-Afro-futuristic matriarchy. If in the first one, Black men and women work together for their society, in this one, Black women are practically alone. The only one left from the previous film is M'Baku, the Monkey King, who despite his charisma, his power is negligible in the face of a threat the film poses to Wakanda. Furthermore, he is far from transgressing the traditional stereotypes about the Black man. Even though he is re-signified, he carries the almost universal symbol of racist defamation, the ape. The very posters of the film indicate this absence. If in the first one we have 4 Black men and women represented, in this one we only have M'Baku in the background. Almost all the Black male characters were killed off and one disappeared without further explanation. In this case, actor Daniel Kaluuya alleged scheduling problems, and his character Wakabi was discarded, simple as that. While the female cast not only remained the same, it grew, which melancholically and tragically is an important aspect of reality. Since Black men have the worst social indicators related to the most primordial right of all, without which no other is possible, the right to life. Suicide Deaths by work accidents, low life expectancy, homicides, and even the symbolic death by imprisonment haunts the lives of millions of Black men, their families, and therefore Black women. I have to point out that, the same statistics we see concerning African American males are the same for Afro-Brazilians. How they're overrepresented in their population percentage in the prison system, and how they're the ones who are usually taken out by police. Particularly those between the age bracket of say 18 to 35. In this photo, we have like graffiti painting images of George Floyd, who everyone knows. Similarly, this is a painting of a guy named João Alberto. I think his name is Freitas, and he was murdered a few years ago on the night before Brazil's nationwide Black Consciousness Day, which is November 20th. He was assaulted and thrown to the ground and beaten by two security guards in the city of Porto Alegre, which is in the south of the country. And he died. You saw they jumped on him. They put the knee in his back. I mean, from some of the pictures, you just saw it was a brutal beating. It led to a lot of protests across the country. Wonder if let me just see if I have any pictures from that. Because one of the things that I often talk about on the blog is that you just don't get many news media outlets talking about this situation in Brazil. So, as you can see, I have a number of articles on the blackbraziltoday.com blog that talks about João Alberto Freitas and, his brutal assassination at a Carrefour supercenter in Porto Alegre in southern Brazil. It led to a lot of protests, not only in Porto Alegre, but in other cities across the country. You saw like violent protests. People were setting stuff on fire. This 40-year-old dies after security agent kneeled on his back for 4 minutes, and it led to protests which erupted across Brazil. What else do we have here? So this is a story that I put up called "It's Nothing New in Brazil. Supermarkets and businesses have a history of aggression against Black customers." So I was saying, it's nothing new that you find in Brazil. This happens all the time. Just Black people are immediately seen as suspects when they just enter banks or supermarkets, for example. So it is no mere coincidence that the last major racially charged demonstrations were based on the cowardly murders of Black men. Internationally, George Floyd, and domestically, João Alberto S. Freitas and Moise M. Kamankabi. That was a pretty shocking murder that happened, I think, earlier in 2022. He was a Congolese immigrant. He was working in Rio de Janeiro. As the story goes, when he demanded payment for 2 days of work, his boss decided to kill him, says the family. This savage beating was caught on film. And it was just ridiculous because it seemed like all of the three guys that beat him to death were all Black Brazilians. So it was a pretty horrific story, actually. So in other words, being Black male makes a difference. In this way, to talk about Black Lives Matter and the genocide of the Black male population, and at the same time legitimize the death of the Panther as a form of homage to Chadwick or for a greater Black female representation is either naive or cynical. They have inaugurated the necropolitics of good. There are more relevant non-Black characters in the Black Panther movie than there are Black men. A real scandal. Now, he said the Black Panther film, but I'm assuming he's talking about the Wakanda Forever film. And another thing I want to point out here, it's long been, this has been a battle phrase going on in Brazil called the genocide of the Black, uses a Black population, but specifically it's the Black male population because, as I just said, is generally young Black males who are killed in everyday violence and police violence across Brazil. That is a real scandal. What else did I want to talk about? Okay, so the other thing is, let's see if I can find this right here. I've said this for years since I discovered the truth about this movement, but I have never supported the Black Lives Matter movement. I've supported the phrase, I can support the phrase that says, Black Lives Matter, which in Portuguese is translated as vidas negras importam. they kind of took this phrase, and you would see a lot of marches and protests across Brazil with this slogan. Let me see what else I have here. I don't know if I have one here, but you just saw this all over the place. I mean, here are some of the pictures that of some of the protests that were going on in Brazil after security agents at that Carrefour store, they brutally, killed this black man. He was 40 years old at the time. This is a highway. It might be in Sao Paulo, but as you can see, the phrase here, "Vidas pretas importam," right? Black Lives Matter. There was a time when one of the founders of Black Lives Matter actually came down to Brazil, and this is right here, Black Lives Matter to Brazil, CERT, which is I think it's an ONG, an NGO in Brazil that studies the relationship between Black and the labor market. Well, we say inequality in the labor market, in the labor market, and how it plays out in terms of whether you're Black or white. And they just produce a lot of statistics on that. So they were instrumental in bringing one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter down to Brazil. And I was just like, okay, so now you're going to deceive Brazilians with this phony movement. I mean, everybody should know this by now. Now, when I said this 2 years ago, people looked at me like, why are you down in the movement? This is about real change. This is going to change things. This is going to stop police brutality and all this other stuff. And, you saw across the United States, all of these protests going on across the country. And I've always just asked the question, I'm like, as I come from an organizing background, I know that it takes a long time to plan out these type of massive protests like the ones, I saw for George Floyd. I'm just saying, once you look behind the scenes and you look at who originally started the Black Lives Matter movement, and then you saw them expose these people who came in and hijacked and took over their movement, and all of a sudden they were just getting like millions of dollars in funding for this. So I'm like, this is another, fake movement. There's enough evidence out there now that I would love to go back and talk to the people. When I originally said this 2 years ago and people didn't see it, I would love to see what these people think now, because there's plenty of evidence out here that supports what my position was 2 years ago.